As we are nearing 12, do you remember something that happened? That there was darkness on the face of the earth.
Do you still remember what happened on Passover at 12 o'clock, almost 2,000 years ago? But that darkness came upon the face of the earth. We always read that when we read the Bible, but have you ever wondered about it? Why is that told? Why did that happen? Because it happened in the literal. It is a sign given us. We read in the Bible that there was darkness between 12 and 3 when Jesus was on the cross. What happened at 3? Can you remember? It was the time when Jesus breathed out his breath. Why did God give us the sign? Allow the darkness to be shown manifesting in the literal while Jesus was on the cross. And it takes you straight back into Genesis. Do you remember that the Bible starts like that? That there was darkness on the face of the deep. And it happened in the literal, but it's a prophecy. And we find that the Spirit of God was moving. And God is the one that turned the darkness. When Jesus breathed out, the darkness was gone. What is this with spirit? It ties with breath in the Hebrew. Let's revisit Genesis 1. And you're going to see something. And remember, who is the one that turned the darkness? It was God. And what is God showing while Jesus was on the cross? Who is this that was on the cross? Where there was darkness, and it got turned by his breath. In Genesis 1 verse 2 we read, "And darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters." The darkness in Hebrew ties with death. There was death, and face with your countenance. There was a death verdict according the countenance of the abyss. And yes, indeed, in the prophetic, there is a death verdict according the countenance of the abyss of our sin. And the Spirit of God, Spirit in Hebrew ties with breath. The breath of God was moving, was shaking, was hovering over the face of the waters. Waters in Hebrew ties with wasting. The Spirit, the breath of God. God in Hebrew ties with the one that has the might to turn things around. What happened on the cross with the darkness? The Spirit, the breath of God, who has the ability to turn things around, was moving, was shaking over the face, over the countenance of the waters. Breath of God that has the might to turn was shaking, was moving over the countenance of wasting. The breath of Jesus was shaking as he breathed out, moving over the countenance of wasting and death. There was a darkness in the literal, shown in Genesis in the beginning. When Jesus was on the cross, again in the literal, God manifested, showed to us in a physical sign the spiritual situation of death according the countenance of the abyss of our sin. And the breath of God, who has the might to turn, was shaking over the wasting. The breath of Jesus, who was dying, was shaking according his death. And God said, God who has the might to turn, declared, "Let there be, let there come to pass light." When Jesus' breath shook out of his body, over the countenance of wasting, there was light. In Genesis 2, we find that God is the one who breathes out his breath to give life. Remember, that's how he gave life in the first place, in the literal. And again, it's a prophecy of how he redeems. Because by breathing out his breath, he turns the darkness. He turns the death verdict. He saves. He gives life in the spiritual. In the same fashion, he gives life in the earth. By his breath. Therefore, God who breathed out his breath, in that first section, in the name of Jesus, God who breathed out his breath, is salvation. Jesus, you can have life because of his breath. The names of God, the first two names of God that we encounter in the Bible, Eli and Yahweh. Eli ties with God mighty to turn, and Yahweh ties with God breathing out his breath. Together, by the way, they spell the name of Elijah, Eliyahu in Hebrew. It prophesies Jesus. Elijah has a prophetic sentence in his name, being a prophet of God. How incredible is God to give his prophet a name such as that? That testifies your life is in God, who has the might to turn the darkness, Eli, who is Yahweh, who breathed out his breath to give life. Now, do you understand the sign given in the literal? Because God has control over creation, and he speaks in the literal of the spiritual. Jesus truly is the only way, because the punishment for sin is death. And if you think your works can save you, who took that? What happened to the death verdict? It is not fulfilled. We cannot, if we take that punishment, we stay down, because we are guilty of the death verdict. But God, who breathed out his breath to give life, can. And he breathed out his breath over the waters, the breath of God, of it, and there is life. God is incredible, and he loves you.